Welcome to the Big World Made Small podcast for the adventure traveler. I'm thrilled you're here. My name is Jason Elkins, and in addition to being your host, I'm also a former U.S. Army paratrooper, third-generation commercial hot air balloon pilot, paramotor pilot, ex-Montana fly fishing guide, advanced open water scuba diver, and a full-time nomad that's visited more than 30 countries on 6 continents. As a seasoned adventure travel expert with a passion for creating and sharing meaningful experiences, I'm on a quest to impact the lives of adventure travelers, the tour operators they rely on, and the communities that host them. Every week, I bring you exclusive interviews with fascinating adventure tourism experts who have agreed to share their personal stories, favorite destinations, and some invaluable travel insights they've picked up along the way. We'll enjoy a casual conversation, create some connections, and likely share some laughs. It's my hope that by the end of each episode, this big world will feel just a bit smaller. Let's get started, shall we? Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Big World Made Small podcast for the adventure traveler. Happy to have everyone back. Today, we've got a special guest who I spoke with, I guess it was 2-3 months ago, just fascinated by her story. So she has volunteered to come on and share it with all of us. So we've got Jean Zunkel. Jean is the president and co-owner of BJ Adventures. Jean, welcome to the show. Happy to have you here.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
I don't go into a lot of your background. I'm not going to sit here and read your bio because it's all going to come out through the course of this conversation, or at least the important parts that we want to discuss. But let's start with this. Actually, what I want to do is I want to go back and figure out, how did you get from where you were to where you are now, which I guess is kind of your story. And I'm curious, how far do you think we should go back?
Ooh, that's a good question, because my friends keep asking me to write a book because it goes back to when I grew up in a very small town in the South. And I knew at the age of 13 that this was not going to be my destiny. And I literally focused all of my time and energy on how do I get out of here? And not that I did not love where I grew up. It's just that I had bigger visions. So at the age of 13, I worked to make sure that I got into a wonderful college, Stevens College in Columbia, Missouri. And I would say that Stevens was the key to my freedom. It prepared me for the rest of my life.
I'm curious. So when you're 13, what I hear is, okay, I know I don't want to live here the rest of my life. I want to go somewhere. Stevens is where you ended up going, but were you already thinking of a goal past that? Or is it just like Stevens, and I'll figure it out from there? Or were you already kind of thinking which direction you wanted to go after?
Well, no, I wasn't thinking that far down the line. Actually, as a child, I knew that I wanted to go to Egypt and to Africa, not really thinking that they were on the same continent. Mm-hmm. But so I knew that I wanted to travel, and I was very fortunate to have an amazing mentor in the 10th grade. And she looked at me and she goes, you got to get out of here. I'm going to make sure this happens. So between her and Stevens, it prepared me. I went to Stevens and majored in fashion merchandising, and then went straight to New York. My parents came to my graduation and they said, okay, let's pack up the car. And I went, no, I'm going straight to New York. I have a job already. So that's what I did. And I've been known as the Maverick in the family ever since. Mm-hmm. My entire family still lives in Georgia, and I'm the only one that's
Do you have some
somewhere
siblings?
else.
Do you have siblings back home as well?
I do. I have 2 sisters and a brother.
Okay. Do they think you're crazy?
No, they love me. And they think that, yes, I'm...
Well, they can think you're crazy and love you at the same time.
They probably do think that I'm a bit crazy, but they always expect the unexpected from me.
Very cool. I'm curious because you'd mentioned you already had ideas of going to Egypt and Africa. Mm-hmm. Where did that inspiration come from? You mentioned your mentor. Was your mentor leaning in that direction towards travel and adventure? Or where did you get the idea that you wanted to go to Africa?
I don't know. I just knew that I read a lot. And so I loved Egypt and the thought of going to Egypt. And my dad was an amazing man. He really encouraged me to follow my dreams. And so that's what I did.
Had your dad ever traveled?
Never. He had not even been out of the county that he lived in, except maybe to go to Florida. But he was my biggest supporter.
Was he, because sometimes our parents or people in our lives can be very supportive, but also very kind of fearful. Did you pick up on that? With if you at 14 or 15 said, Dad, I'm going to Africa. Maybe he's supportive, but was he fearful and protective as well? Or how would you kind of describe how he's
No, he was not protective at all. He really wanted to know everything. He wanted me to travel and come back and tell him everything I had seen, because he was also a voracious reader. And I got that from him, I believe. And my mother was totally different. She was very happy to be at home and raise her children and not go out and see the world. And I just made it a goal that I wanted to see every country in the world, having no idea what that list looked
What
like.
that meant.
No, had no idea. But, I sort of constructed my life between textiles and design and marketing because I traveled a lot with that over 30 something years. And that introduced me to a lot of countries. And then I had a travel business at the same time on the side as a hobby. And that's another story. We'll get to that one a little bit later. And now I've turned 80 and I have been to 197 countries. So I don't think I'm doing too badly.
You're getting close.
I know. There's still a few on the list that I really want to see.
Some of them are a little harder to get to. I'm guessing, I don't know if you've knocked out some of those hard ones already, but I know that that can be a big challenge. So
it is a big challenge. And some of them are really hard to get to. And some of them I really am not interested in because now the list is over 300, but it includes countries and territories and islands and stuff like that. But the old list was like 200 or maybe 195 or something like that. So I'm rapidly ticking those away.
Curious, when you chose your major, did you go into that major thinking this is a great opportunity to travel, or were you just more interested in the actual major and it just turned out that the side benefit was you got to travel?
I think the side benefit was that I got to travel because I knew that I wanted to be in fashion. I was always interested in that and design. And it just led me to travel, which was a bonus.
Yeah, very cool. When did you start doing your travel business on the side? Like if we were to look at the timeline, go to Stevens, go to New York, start traveling for work. Did it take you very long to get inspired to kind of do your own travel thing?
Well, on the road, I got married and my husband was an international banker. Mm-hmm. So that took us, the first overseas assignment was to Johannesburg, South Africa. And it impacted our lives for the rest of our lives. We loved it. We made great friends there. And even when we moved to Luxembourg after that, and then back to the U.S. and several different stops in the U.S., some I won't mention. But we ended up in New York City, which was great. And then I ran into an old friend of mine from college, and we started a design marketing company. But I took my daughter on safari when she was 15. And when I came back, I said, oh, wow, we got to do this more often. And so a friend of mine from the Johannesburg days, she was also an American, we decided to start doing safaris. And they were mobile safaris. We were hardcore authentic. Mm-hmm. And she had a full-time job and I had a full-time job, but we took the month of August off every year. She was in DC and I just told, I said, this is it. We're taking the month of August. And then we started taking friends on safari. And then it evolved into, okay, where are we going next? So then I would fall back on the countries that I was working in: Colombia, Turkey, Asia, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and Portugal. So we started doing that because I had a network in every country. They weren't DMCs, they were friends. Mm-hmm. And so it just evolved. And here we are all these years later. This was in the late 80s. And then we actually formed a real business in 93. And that's when it took off. And then I retired from textiles and then got very serious about the travel business. And now my business partner retired, and then my daughter became my business. And very now cool. We have a great business.
And here we are. And we're going to discuss that. And you mentioned that I think your words were, I met my husband while I was on the road or while traveling. So I'm curious, what does that look like? You were traveling when you met him?
No, I was actually working in San Francisco at iMagnets, and I met him through a friend.
Was he living in San Francisco?
He was living in San Francisco.
Okay.
And but working in the Caribbean, buying privately owned banks to turn them into Bank of America branches.
It's kind of the dream, I think, for a lot of people. I mean, you probably already know this. Like, you're into travel, you enjoy travel, you meet a guy who is an international banker. And even if you didn't like to travel, I think a lot of people find that quite appealing. Been doing a lot of business in the Caribbean. It sounds like a pretty perfect fit. And then, so you went and lived places with him. Did he have the travel bug as well? Or he just happened to be in banking and that required him to travel?
I think he enjoyed travel, but he had never traveled like that. And once we started traveling, he was great. And now he loves to travel, of course. We're no longer married, but we're very good friends. But we used to tease him because we said he slept in a vest. He was such a serious banker. And now he's very much relaxed and enjoys his life.
That's really good. And I also want to now your daughter, because this is obviously, she's a huge part of this. You mentioned that first safari when she was 15. I have for years wanted to take my son on a safari. Haven't got there yet. He's 18, but I've been to Africa a couple times, and I actually took my mom on safari in South Africa and Zambia, which was really cool just to have that, I guess in my case, mother-son, in your case, mother-daughter type of experience. So I'm curious if like a memory from that trip. I just want to take our listeners, take me there with you and your 15-year-old daughter on safari in Africa and share something with us. That just sounds really cool.
It was such an amazing trip because she was the perfect age to go. And so is your son, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
It was just the two of us, and we joined this crazy group. And some of us are still friends today, all these many years later. But there we were in Botswana, sleeping in tents, in the wild, knowing that animals were all around us. And we were literally moving every day. So it was a real mobile safari.
Mm-hmm.
Sleeping on the top of the Land Rover, cooking out in the bush. It was something that we had never experienced together. So it was such a bonding and such an experience for her. She was in a private school in New York City and really had never done anything like that. And now, of course, she is taking her children to do the same thing and experience the same things. In fact, they were just in Botswana last week. We're doing film shoot for marketing for the company. So they were there like the ideal family on safari.
Oh, nice. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
That is so cool.
Yeah. And the kids love it and she loved it. And then all we've ever done is to try to get people to go on safari. I mean, because to us, that is the ultimate.
Now, be honest with me, because she was 15. And I know she's going to listen to this. I know she's your business partner.
She will.
She's going to listen to this. So just put that out there. And she knows she's got kids, so she can probably relate. Was there any moment or any memory that you have of her complaining at all?
No, she never complained. Never, not once. But I will tell you an experience that we had together. We ended up in Victoria Falls and she wanted to do whitewater rafting. Mm-hmm. Well, the Zambezi is the wildest river in the world with 5 rapids. I mean, number 5 and one number 6 that we had to portage around. But you have to walk down this huge canyon, do your whitewater rafting. We were flipped and it totally undid me. I couldn't find her. And so it freaked me out. But somebody kept screaming, she's downriver on a rock. She's fine. So, but I'll tell you, my energy was spent, just the emotional side of that. And when I had to climb out of that canyon, and in those days, they did not have steps. You sort of hung onto a tree branch and climbed up this thing. I crawled out on that ledge and cried. I was so relieved. But so that was quite an experience for us on that trip, but it did not deter us. She has been back whitewater rafting several times, not me. One time for me, that was it.
But they say that in order to bond with people, you really need an emotional something to make it happen. And oftentimes it's something scary. We call it trauma bonding, I think.
Well, I'm sure.
But when you survive it.
Yeah. I'm sure that's what it was with the two of us because she's my only child. And so the sun rises and sets on her even today. Yeah. And she's 54.
Yep. That's very cool. Thank you for sharing that. And what about her? Well, let me ask you this. Do you think she was interested in traveling before you took that trip? Was she like excited to go to Africa, or is this just, Mom, I'd rather hang out with my friends, but
well, remember she had, when we moved to Africa, the first moved when she was 2 weeks old. I had her and boom, we were gone. And so she spent her first 3.5 years in South Africa. Her first language is Zulu. And then we moved to Luxembourg and she was there for 3.5 years. So she had always moved and always traveled with us. So she found it very interesting. I mean, she has not traveled by herself. I mean, when she was younger, she did not like go off. She took her first trip without me and her father when she graduated from high school and went on a European trip with a group of kids. And that was fun. So she's always traveled.
Was she, looking back, it's always easier to see things, I guess, looking back, but take yourself back to that point. Could you envision, because oftentimes we think about what our kids are going to do. He's going to be an engineer. She's going to be a this, that, and maybe sometimes it's what we want them to be. And then there's other times that's like, well, it's pretty obvious and it has nothing to do with me. So I'm curious, if you were to go back to that point in time, could you have envisioned her working in the travel business?
No, never.
I guess you weren't even quite at that point, right?
No, I never ever thought about her being in the travel business. She went to college and I said to her, enjoy these 4 years, and it will only be 4 years. You will finish in 4. And I said, major in whatever you want to major in, just enjoy this time because it'll never come back again. So she majored in the Russian language and anthropology. Well, you really can't get a job with either of those. Okay. So but she's always worked. She's always had a great work ethic, and she is super smart, very detail oriented. She has that analytical mind. She's an Aquarian, but she ended up working at Coca-Cola. She went to Emory, and I called her and I said, okay, I'm divorced and I'm moving from New York to Santa Fe. And she goes, can I go with you? I hate corporate life. I said, sure. So I picked her up. She came to Santa Fe with me. We had a great time moving to Santa Fe, so different from New York City. And then she started working in event planning, did weddings, big high-profile weddings. And then she ended up, there's an organization called the International Folk Art Market in Santa Fe. And she was hired because of her event planning experience to do the very first one 21 years ago. So she stayed with them for 10 years. And my granddaughter was the first folk art baby. And then when she had her second one, she did not really want to go back to a full-time job like that. So I said, well, come and work for me, see if you like it. And she was a natural. And what's so funny is that she said she didn't want to work full-time like that. Well, now she works all the time. When you have your own business, work doesn't stop.
Sometimes it's nice to just have a job. You can walk out of it at the end of the day.
Yeah, she can't do that. The lights do not go off.
You said that she's kind of, I believe you said kind of the analytical type. And that's one of the challenges in tourism businesses sometimes the people that start these businesses are maybe not so analytical. They're just much more like, I want adventure. I want to see everything. And they just kind of trust that things will work out. And there's a lot of people start tourism businesses that don't last very long. And then if you can partner, I think the smart tour operator that's like that finds somebody that's a little bit more analytical, a little bit more consistent, whatever words you want to use, responsible. I don't know. Maybe I'm talking about myself here in the sense that I need someone responsible in my life. What did she like? What was her first job with you? What does she bring to the team that kind of offsets? I know we're talking a lot about her, but I'm actually learning a lot about you in the process.
No, it's very good. Well, first of all, we are very close. We've always been very close. And she respects me and my skills, and I respect her because she's an integral part of the company now. And when she first came in, she goes, Mom, your itineraries are really dated looking. I said, okay. And she goes,
you're the designer, the fashion designer?
Yeah. And she said, your website is really kind of dated too. I said, okay, that's your first project. Update the website and come up with something new for the itineraries. So she did that. And then during COVID, we didn't have any business at all. We were sitting around looking at each other, and we decided to invest in the company instead of just getting scared. So she brought in an Oasis platform, which is where now we create all of our itineraries from. And I said to her, okay, this is great, but you're going to do that. That's not my skill set. So now she's in charge of all of that. So she has brought in many, many things. When my first business partner, Betsy, and I started the business, that's the B and J. There are men out there that have a nasty mind. So BJ Adventures.
I did not think of that at all until you mentioned that.
I am so proud of you because honestly, It is one of those things that follows us around.
And
Adina,
knowing myself, I'm surprised I didn't make that connection. But anyway, let's continue before I say anything.
well, anyway, Betsy and I started the business, and Betsy was really the analytical one. And so she handled all the original books, and then we worked together doing itineraries and pricing. But she kept up with everything because I was really traveling 280 days a year with textiles at that time. I was out of the country. So Betsy did that. And I was more the one that talks and gets people to come. And I lead all the trips, and, they love to travel with Jean. And, the tagline for the company is "Where in the world is Jean?" And so when Betsy retired, I mean, obviously I know how to do the books and all that stuff, and I'm on top of it. But when Adina came in and she took over that role, I was so happy. I mean, it was just great because she stays on me, buddy. She keeps me on the right path. I got to tell you.
Mm-hmm. I just think that's super important to have that because, just even if you look at the podcast, most of the people I'm having conversations with are the person that talks a lot. It's a podcast.
Right. Yeah.
The one that talks a lot, likes to connect with people, is excited about life and look at all these amazing things we can do. And then you need that person that probably doesn't want to come on a podcast, that is happy to put services into the Oasis platform, for example, or to keep the books straight and to actually, ensure that this business continues and that the money we make doesn't all go right out the window on fun trips and stuff like that.
That's my Adina. And it's very funny because I keep trying to wean myself from leading trips.
Mm-hmm.
But the truth of the matter is people want to travel with me because I do make it fun.
Mm-hmm.
I do take them to places they would never have thought of going.
Mm-hmm.
So she is very happy to be inside the company. And so she looked at me the other day and she goes, the truth of the matter is I think you just need to keep traveling as long as you can, because I did a trip recently and out of that trip came 6 new trips. And if somebody else were leading that group, it wouldn't have happened that way. And, I just got back from Oman and it was a fabulous trip. Oh, my word. It was incredible. And we were posting every day. The social media person was posting every day. And so I already have requests for Oman.
Mm-hmm.
Where is this, Jean? It looks fabulous,
Mm-hmm. I had a mentor when I kind of early on who, his name was Dave Parker, and worked at Orvis with him. He's the one that brought me onto Orvis when I was working at Orvis Travel. And anyway, he was just always, Jason, the best place to sell a trip is on a trip. And
Absolutely.
He was a firm believer that, because I could have hired trip lead. I did. I shouldn't say I could have. I did because we had to sometimes. But he always encouraged me to, if at all possible, to go lead the trip, even if that left a big void in the office and, maybe the calls weren't getting answered quite as quickly. But he's just the best place to sell a trip is on a trip. And that was so true. I had so many guests that would just travel with me wherever. And on every trip, they'd say, "Okay, Jason, where are we going next?"
Well, that is, so now you know why that happened to us.
Yeah. No, I get it completely.
Yeah. And
do you think Adina would, did I say it right? Did I say her name right? Adina. Do you think, is she enthusiastic about leading trips, or is that just not even just like, okay.
Not at all.
Yeah.
And that's fine. She's very happy to travel with her family. They love to travel, but she does not want to lead a group. But I will say our company doesn't do a lot of group trips. Most of it is FIT, families, friends, 2 couples, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But we probably do maybe 4 trips a year that are group trips. And the reason we do those is because it's somewhere I want to go. And so then I send out and say, okay, I've got this trip. Does anybody want to go?
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I lead that. And then we do 1 trip a year with the folk art market to visit countries where the artists have come to Santa Fe for this exhibit. And then we visit them in their country to see them in their villages.
That's cool.
Yeah, it's really cool. I started the program with the folk art market 18 years ago. And we've probably taken many travelers to over 35 countries to visit artists. So those are great trips.
Now, you meet the artists there in Santa Fe, and then
yes,
you take a group to go visit the artist wherever they're from or where they live. So the people in your group, they're just meeting the artist for the first time when you arrive in Ghana
Well,
or where it is, right?
Not necessarily. If they have been to the Santa Fe International Folk Art Market, they may have met those artists.
Okay.
So they get to see them again. But sometimes it's a first time visit to a country. I just did a trip this September to Swaziland. And Swaziland was never on the top of anybody's list, but there is incredible craft in that country. And so we did a trip and it was wonderful. It was just great to meet basket weavers and textile weavers and pottery makers. And so, we do that. My trip this year is Ghana, Togo, and Benin. And that is very exciting because that's an amazing part of the world. I have been there before, but I'm probably going to have to lead this trip because it's sold out.
Okay. So what does that mean? You said I'm probably going to have to lead this trip because it's sold out.
Well,
I understand that.
Well, normally I have two people that also do trips for us, and they are very good at leading trips. But this one has sold out, which means there are more people than normal. Our groups are very small, and so I may need to go with this group just to
because it's a big group. And
it's a big group.
It's hard to handle one or two. Yeah,
one person. And I've just brought my niece on the 2 years now. She's been with us over 2 years. I've got her on the road. I had her in 11 countries last year so that she could see what this travel business is all about.
So is your niece, do you kind of peg her as somebody that would lead trips? Does she have that personality and desire to?
Absolutely. She's just like me.
Yeah. All right. That's good. So you'll still have the balance.
Yes.
This is good because you need both parts.
No,
that's
you have to.
You can't take an accountant and start a travel business for them if they don't want to go out and be with guests.
No, it'll be a perfect balance again. And we haven't really touched on the fact that I have an all-woman company and we have 5 other women that work with us and do amazing jobs. They have been with us for a long time. And each one has their own specialty. So we just give them all the power and the strength to do what they do best.
That is so cool. And I'm going to come back to that in a minute because I have a few questions about that. And before we go that direction, so like based on your experience, you've got the personality. I mean, obviously, I can tell that I've led enough group trips. I know what that takes. You clearly have that. And I guess 2 questions. One is like with your niece, what's the biggest piece of advice that either you've already given her about leading group trips or that you plan to give her before she starts leading them on her own? Maybe she already is. I don't know. But so anybody that's listening to this that maybe wants some advice, what would be the advice to somebody that wants to lead trips?
I think the first thing I would tell her is that she has to learn to read the room. She has to understand the personality and the needs of every person on that group. And it's her job to make sure that she gives attention to every single person because every person has paid something to be on that trip and they deserve as much attention as the next person. So to me, that's absolutely critical. And she has to have a good attitude.
Can you give me an example of what that either has looked like for a trip you've led in the past, like a specific example or a general example for those of our listeners that maybe don't understand why that's so important?
Well, I think, today we have so many things to deal with. Our clients are 55 to 93, actually. That's our oldest client. And he goes somewhere every year, by the way. But I think now, after COVID, people don't really tell you the truth about their mobility issues. And in many cases, it's because they're not aware of them. At home, you know your territory, you know what you can do, you know how to get around. But if you're on a trip and you have to walk on pebbles and rocks and you have to climb a set of steps and they can't do it. So we have to be very mindful of that. Also, people have a lot of eating issues. I mean, believe me, it's, the list is endless. And
has that gotten worse over the years? You've been in this long enough and I have too. And I recognize things have changed. You used to every once in a while get somebody, I'm vegetarian. Okay. I know what that means.
Yes, I know what that means. But listen, you have no idea. I mean, the most challenging one I have ever had.
And we're not making fun of anybody.
No, definitely.
Your clients are listening to this.
No, definitely not. But the most challenging one I ever had was a client only ate raw food.
Okay, yeah.
And so when you're on safari and you only eat raw food, you have to be very creative to come up with a different idea for salads every day. So, but we did it and we were very successful at it. So I was very proud of us in doing that. But so I think those kind of issues come up. Also, we try to interview carefully because some people think they want to go on a group, but they really should never be on a group. They should really travel by themselves. And
how do you explain that without sounding like they're just a jerk?
I have this wonderful traveler and I love her dearly. And she's traveled a lot with us. And finally, one day I said to her, I said, from now on, you need to travel by yourself. Because when you're in a group, you can't be the only person. And you have to share the space. We try to do that in a diplomatic way. And sometimes it's just high maintenance. Mm-hmm. But we always manage to work it out. And I have a way of getting the message across without being ugly or insulting or hurting somebody's feelings.
So what do you want to say now to that person who's on your mailing list is going to get an email some point saying, hey, I was on this podcast with Jason and all your guests are going to listen to it. So you might have a handful of guests that are all thinking, I think she's talking about me.
But I would say that most of our clients are really great and so easy to work with. They really are. And we don't advertise at all. We've never advertised, only by referral. Mm-hmm. And so they know when they come to us sort of what to expect and how we operate. We are very involved. I mean, to the point of being ridiculous. From the first phone call until they get home, we know everything they're doing. We are behind them, ahead of them, following up, making sure things are working smoothly. We don't just book a trip and walk away. Mm-hmm. That is not who we are because we are small and we care. So we have great repeat travelers.
What's your favorite part of the process? Maybe because the process goes way back. It's hard to say where does the process start. But let's say from inquiry to your last communication with them about their specific trip. And let's do that two-part question. One is an FIT that you're not going to travel with. And then the second part of the question would be a group trip.
Okay. For me, I like to interview the person to find out what their likes and dislikes are, what their expectations are. And for me and Adina, because sometimes we work together on something, but normally she'll take the lead on one and I'll take the lead on one, especially because she feels comfortable doing Africa and I'm comfortable doing the world. And so, because I've been to many more places, but the fun part for me is creating an itinerary that fits that person's needs and desires. I love the planning process of what's involved in that trip. And then, of course, I love to price it because I want to make sure that it falls within their budget.
So that's the designer part.
Yeah, that's the designer part.
There's a lot of creativity that can go into that.
No, there is because, listen, it's very important even where we put them in hotels. I want to match a hotel with their personality and what their expectations are. So we have choices and we can do that. I just don't put them in a hotel that sits in Cape Town, for example. Mm-hmm. I mean, we carefully select the properties for people.
How do you do this interview with your potential new guests, new clients? I'm just curious, are you doing all of this by back and forth by email? Are you doing phone calls, video calls? I'm just curious what you
emails, phone calls, and sometimes video calls. It just depends. If it's really complicated, then we'll do all three.
Yeah, because I know
rarely
video calls,
in person.
Right. Because we didn't used to do video calls, back in the day. Didn't really have Zoom and all that stuff. And what I've learned from doing so many video calls, both for the podcast, for anybody that isn't aware of this, I'm looking at Jean here on a computer screen, and I've noticed that having conversations is so much easier when you can see face to face. And I go back in the day when I was having conversations with people, maybe on the phone, and I'd put together an itinerary for them, or I would make suggestions, and I was trying to listen to their voice to see if I could hear the excitement go up or the excitement go down. I'd say, well, we've got this option or this option, and I'm trying to guess what they're most excited about just based on the tone of their voice. And I feel like, I'm not doing a lot of sales stuff or itinerary, working directly with clients to build itineraries now. And I just feel like, man, the video call might really add another layer to that, especially if you're having a hard time reading somebody, if their emails are cryptic. Right. Well, I guess we could do that. What does that mean?
Yeah. No,
Okay. I was just curious.
it's true because some people have no idea. And then you just sort of have to ask the leading questions to figure out how to get started,
And look for the eyebrows to raise and excitement or whatever.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Now, to answer the question about a group trip, basically, I'm just creating the trip based upon what I think the trip should look like because I'm not looking for input from them.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm trying to be general, and I hate the word try, it doesn't exist, but we work hard to have a smattering of everything, good food, good hotel. Some can do the walking, some may not be able to, but to have a backup plan. It's a little more complicated with a group like that, and it depends on the destination.
Curious. I had a hot air balloon ride business for several years, and I grew up learning to fly balloons. And for a while, I had my balloon ride business. And what I noticed was I don't know, maybe I was just justifying my selfishness, but what I noticed was if I'm having fun, they're having fun. And part of that's just my energy is if I'm having fun, they're having fun. So, and it was almost like, okay, read the room for sure. Get a kind of a feel like if they're already nervous about being in a balloon, I might not take them over the most dramatic place and,
right.
Do things fast, but otherwise it was generally, it's like, if I'm having fun, they're going to have fun. And with group trips, if I know I'm going to be leading the group trip, I'm probably going to design it in a way that I just think is cool. Because if I get there all excited about what the trip's going to be like and I meet them the first time and, if I'm excited, maybe they'll be excited. And, we didn't have to discuss 14 different options for what we could do. We're going to do this, taking into account what you said about, there are some differences you have to be sensitive to, or you're going to have to deal with them later.
Exactly. Yeah. So we work sort of the same way with a group trip because if I am enthusiastic about it and if I'm leading it, then yes, everybody else is going to have a good time. I mean, it'll be rare not to have a good time.
I get that. And that being said, so talk a little bit about the process and your kind of strategy for putting these together. And what's the fun part though on the group? What's the moment during that process when you maybe get that dopamine hit or that adrenaline or that just like, wow, this is why I'm doing this?
We like to put a surprise in any itinerary so that something they're not expecting. And it could be a helicopter ride. Instead of, on a small plane, it could be a hot air balloon. It could be anything. And usually it's at the right time. I love to see the expression of excitement, something that they were not prepared for.
Yeah. Yeah. Because otherwise it's like, oh, well, tomorrow we're going to go fly in a balloon. Okay, great.
Exactly.
The next day we're going to go, rafting on the Zambezi. Probably not on one of your group trips.
Not if I'm there.
But there's that like, everything there is cool, but there is that expectation and that pleasant little surprise dropped in probably, 2/3 of the way through or wherever you put it is that moment of, oh, wow.
Well, the other thing, because my daughter and her husband and I all own houses in South Africa now so that we have a place to escape to if we need to.
Mm-hmm.
And we, of course, love it. And our homes are in the same small village in the Western Cape. But what we have done and been very successful at is because I have friends all over the world, we want our travelers to connect with somebody we know personally. They have dinner at their home, or we give them a special guide that we've known for a long time, or I let them have lunch in a restaurant in a place that's owned by a friend of mine so that it becomes much more personal. And we do that with all of our itineraries. I'm just working on one right now for a single man who wants to spend a month in Africa. And I have put together an amazing itinerary for him for 31 days. And he's doing things that he would never have found on his own.
Yeah. Yeah. That's super cool. That's the value of working with someone like yourself as opposed to just trying to go figure it out on TripAdvisor or whatever, whatever.
I don't know how
people do things.
How people do that because their logistics are mind-boggling these days. Putting a trip together for somebody is really easy for us. I'll tell you, the hardest part for us today are the bloody airlines. Yeah. They are killing us. It's horrible.
You spend all this time and effort to put together something amazing and one flight change, cancellation. It's like you're spending, the whole time they're supposed to be there relaxing. You're scrambling to trying to get, is that what you're talking about when you say the airlines?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. We really encourage people to come a day early and just to allow for anything like that. Because if a flight is canceled, you may not be able to get, especially to Africa, you may not be able to get on another flight for 2 days. The planes are full, totally full.
Wow.
So you can't go standby anymore. That doesn't work.
Yeah, that's on the group trips. I'm just curious because I know you've led so many group trips, and probably a lot of them are with people you already know, or the guests you've already traveled with, and maybe some of their friends join, or maybe you get some new people that kind of join as well. I remember for some reason the moment when I felt the most emotional, the adrenaline, the dopamine, or whatever, for some reason was always at the end of the trip, as soon as I said goodbye to them. And I used to feel bad. I used to think, does this mean I don't like this job? Like I'm only happy when it's over. and then after some more reflection and conversations with people like yourself, I kind of changed my take on that. And I'm curious, do you get that? And if so, what's the significance you give to it? Or maybe you don't get it at all. Maybe you're sad. I don't know.
You know, I think that new friendships are formed on a lot of our trips. And for me, I'm always kind of sad to see it end because people really don't want it to end. And they're already talking about what can they do next. But for me personally, I'm generally exhausted because I put 150% into every day. And so I'm relieved that everybody is okay. I'm relieved that we've had no accidents or issues. I'm relieved that I can go get a glass of wine and just relax. But it's always a little sad. It really is.
Okay. Yeah. No, I appreciate that. I think what I had come to kind of for myself was, one is, like you said, I was on the whole time.
Yeah.
And I like being on. It's my personality. But at the same time, after a week or two of constantly being on and constantly worrying about every step, like, is the guide going to show up on time? I mean, I hired a good guide, but things happen,
Yes.
So is the transfer going to show up on time, or is the airline going to change something? So you're constantly and reading the room, which can be exhausting because you've got some people that make it really obvious what they need. And you've got other people that it may take 3 or 4 days before you figure out what they need to have a good time.
That's very true. Well, I'm very blessed because I do have Adina behind me. She is reconfirming everything. So when I'm on a trip, I don't really have to worry about anything like that. I know that she is handling all those details. Of course, WhatsApp has made it so amazing. You can be in touch with anybody anywhere.
I wish I would have had that back in the day when I was leading trips. And because, I mean, just even getting any sort of self-service was a real challenge. I remember a trip I led to Chile, flew into Santiago, meeting my group at the Ritz-Carlton the following morning. We're going to go spend a week on a big boat with helicopters. And it was this amazing trip. I'd already led the trip 1 or 2 times before, but I actually didn't even have a cell phone because where I was living in Vermont, we didn't have good service anyway. I didn't even have a cell phone. And there was a big earthquake that night, like a big earthquake. You might even remember hearing about it. The airport collapsed and it was kind of a thing. And it was like, I think me and my boss both kind of realized, geez, maybe Jason should have a cell phone because I was, like trying to work through the desk and I knew the guests were staying in the hotel, but they looked like most of them. And it was just, people weren't in their rooms. So you couldn't just say, can you please call room 213 because they weren't in the room because it was an earthquake.
Yeah.
They were either in the lobby or down in the grass outside. It was just, so anyway, so that was, and now I'm thinking we've got WhatsApp groups. You put everybody in one WhatsApp group and everybody's like, hey, I got to the airport a little early. Is anybody else on this flight? And let's go grab some coffee. And it's just like,
well, see, that's what we do now. And it's great. Yeah. And then if we are in a place that we know that there will not be Wi-Fi, I have to say I like those places, but I have a sat phone. So if anybody needs an urgent call or something, we can do that.
Right. That's good to mention because you mentioned the age range of your clients. It's good to feel that comfort that you've got that around.
Everybody has to have travel insurance. And I know it's an aggravation because it's so expensive. But honestly, trips, I don't even care who you are today. Unexpected things happen. So you really do need travel insurance.
You can look at it as expensive or you just try and reframe it. This is part of the trip.
Right.
Like I'm spending $8,000, $12,000 The insurance is a couple $100, whatever it is. And I'm not quoting insurance. I'm not an insurance agent, but it's like, okay, just kind of mentally add that to the price. That's just part of the trip because it is so important. And I mean, unfortunately, I've been around the travel business long enough to know sometimes people don't come back in the same condition that they left.
Absolutely.
And the trip insurance can help. So anyway, we've pitched that. Is there a particular brand you want to mention?
No, I'm not going to do that.
Let's not go there. I'm still holding out that maybe a trip insurance company will sponsor the podcast someday. Let's not mention any names anyway. So, boy, man, we have discussed a bunch of things, Gene. I'm curious because we could just keep going. I know we could. And what did I forget to ask you, or what should I have asked you, or what do you want to make sure that our listeners know about either you, your business, or just general philosophical thoughts that you want to share with them before we wrap up?
Well, I guess you didn't ask me what my favorite destination is.
Do you know how many times I've asked that just in general and people say, oh, it's impossible, but I'll play along. Gene, so after visiting 190, did you say countries? 197 countries. What's your favorite destination?
Africa. Always.
Not just Egypt.
No, not just Egypt, but
the other one, Africa.
But Africa is pretty enticing. And I guess my most favorite difficult, challenging trip was done a long time ago, and I was in the Solomon Islands.
Okay.
And that was an amazing destination, but I've never taken anyone there because has changed a lot since I was there. I mean, I saw it in its pure raw form, and it's just made so many changes.
I suspect there's at least a few people that are listening to this that really don't know much about the Solomon Islands, myself included.
Well, the Solomon Islands are in the Pacific, and they were very integral during World War II. Guadalcanal is on the Solomon Islands. And basically, the Solomons were headhunters until the 60s. And they're very prehistoric, very similar to New Guinea, Papua New Guinea. But it was an amazing trip. And
what made it complicated? Because I think you said it most complex or complicated. I can't remember the word you used exactly.
Absolutely. We arrived with no planning at all. We had no idea what we were getting into. And I said, have you planned food for the group? No. I said, okay, so we went to the market and got food. So that was my first time to organize that. And it was raining, and we spent 3 weeks in the back of pickup trucks, soaking wet, traveling from one island to the next. Was
this with guests? Was this with your clients?
It was with 5 friends.
5 friends. Okay.
5 friends.
Are they still friends?
Yes, the ones that are alive are still friends.
All right. Well, I wasn't meaning that. I just meant I should have said immediately after this trip, were they still friends?
And I guess what I would want somebody to know is that we really are passionate about what we do. We make it an effort to visit every single place that we put someone so that we can speak with authority. We care about our travelers. And I would just say, travel. Don't stop traveling, because I think that it's a great way to be an ambassador to the world. And hopefully that would bring peace by meeting other communities and knowing that basically everybody on the planet wants the same thing. They want a roof over their head. They want to feed their families. They want to educate their families. And they may speak a different language and they may wear different clothes, but we're all the same people. And the world has a lot to offer.
This big world, we're all on it together, and let's make it a little smaller. Is that kind of like the big world made small? I love your words. That's beautiful. Gene, thank you so much for your insights, your wisdom, and your sense of humor. I really enjoyed having you on the show and look forward to coming back and maybe collaborating on some other projects at some point.
Thank you so much. It's been a great pleasure, and to see you face to face and talk about a lot of things.
It was wonderful. Thanks, Gene. Talk to you soon. I trust you enjoyed listening to the conversation as much as I enjoyed recording it. If you're enjoying the Big World Made Small podcast, please take a moment to tell the algorithm by subscribing and posting a review so that others can benefit as well. I also invite you to take a quick trip over to bigworldmadesmall.com and join our private adventure travel community to receive new episode notifications, special access to our guest experts, and perhaps even some exclusive partner offers that we haven't discussed on the podcast. I'll publish another episode soon. Until then, keep exploring. It's the best way to make a big world feel just a bit smaller.